Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, How Costly is the Lack of Visibility to Your Supply Chain? Before we begin this webinar, let's cover a few housekeeping items. In the screen in front of you, you can see multiple application widgets that you can use during this webinar. The first is the copy of today's slides that are available in the additional materials box on the left. Below, you can also register for the upcoming webinar, The State of Trade Brexit Trade Talks Come Down to the Wire on September 16th. Another widget you'll see in front of you is the QA widget. We will try to answer questions throughout this webinar, but also leave additional questions for the end if we do not have time to respond to you. You can expand the slide and video area widget or maximize it in full by clicking on the arrows on the top right corner. Please share your feedback with us about this webinar. We would love to know what topics you would like to cover. You would like us to cover in the future. You can do this by the widget in the middle. After this webinar, the on-demand version will be available, and you can access this using the same origins link that was sent to you earlier. Then, on a legal note, please keep in mind that all information provided in this webinar is presented based on the situation at the time and may not be customized to your specific situation. Now I would like to introduce today's speakers. Mathijs Slangen is Flexport's VP of Sales in Europe, and Richard Evans is Managing Director of Slimstock UK and Nordics. Richard has been involved in supply chain optimization for over 20 years, with the last 15 years being dedicated to inventory optimization. He has a huge passion for the topic and views this passion as essential for success. Our other speaker today is Mathijs. Mathijs is responsible for further growing the sales and marketing organization of Flexport in Europe. He's a 14-year industry veteran. His passion to build the best sales org in the logistics industry. At Flexport, he focuses on new business development and consultative selling. Hi, Mathijs. Great to have you here. The floor is yours.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Rimke, for the introduction. And Richard, thank you for joining us here on this co-production between Flexport and Slimstock. So super excited about this webinar. Which, as I mentioned, is a joint effort between Flexport and Slimstock. Let's start by explaining why we're doing this together. Our companies met up some time ago while we were working actually on the same customer. And we figured out, by the way, that we're working on a lot of customers simultaneously. And obviously, that was both from different angles, right? So we were focusing on our part and Slimstock focusing on theirs, but with a very similar goal, actually, right? Which was how can we make better informed decisions together with our customer, predominantly based on data. So while both of us were making good progress with our customer, separately, we started thinking about new opportunities going forward. And imagine if we would use each other's data. That was actually the first starting point of our discussion. We could actually make a big leap in creating more end-to-end visibility for our customers, and on top of that, realize significant cost savings for our customers. And it turned out to be successful. We had some very nice successes, which we are going to share with you today as well. So we would actually like to take you on this journey together and have a discussion around that, like we did in the past, like Richard and I and other people from both organizations have done. Good to start with, let's say, explain and share your view on what end-to-end visibility means, or definition, if you will.
Sure. Well, firstly, Mathijs, thank you very much for having me here today. It really is a pleasure. I can promise you before we start that I haven't got some sort of background behind me you are genuinely looking at some blue sky in the UK. So if you have the opportunity to take a photo, it doesn't happen very much. So no, but thanks again. In terms of the end-to-end visibility, I think I would generally view it in 3 distinct areas. I think these distinct areas being upstream visibility as number 1, downstream visibility as number 2, and internal or within visibility as number 3. And I number them purely for sequence rather than importance. I don't put any particular importance on one over the other. But perhaps in terms of what I mean by upstream visibility, this is towards your suppliers. Many of our customers, both our joint customers, source globally, and even if they source locally, actually their particular local supplier probably sources globally themselves. So it truly is a modern world, without sounding too cheesy, with global sourcing, and this creates a great deal of complexity, more complexity than ever. And quite often what we see is there are very solid commercial relationships in place with these suppliers. Sometimes they're long-standing, sometimes more recent, but these commercial relationships are often very solid. But rarely is there good collaboration, and rarely is there good mutual understanding from a supply chain environment. And maybe to give you a good example of this, we see many businesses where they have multiple products that they source from a particular supplier. And when you ask what the lead time is for these products, it is always related to the supplier. So they say, my supplier is ABC Limited, and therefore every product from ABC Limited is a 7-day lead time. But the bit of information that they seem to miss is they assume that every one of those products are available from that supplier, or that supplier holds them to stock. Whereas if that supplier holds them to order, actually you need to understand the lead time that they place on their supplier. So it really is important to get this visibility upstream. And of course, in terms of accuracy, it goes without saying that true visibility of what is coming inbound from your upstream is also extremely important. So that's the upstream one. In terms of the downstream one, obviously, probably you've guessed what I'm about to say. This is towards your customers. So are you getting notification of your customer having a promotion? Are they introducing new products that you supply, or exiting products that they don't see as valuable to their assortment? What's going on in their world? And often this information, if you are a truly A-class supplier to this customer and they're very mature, then maybe they will be passing this information to you. But perhaps not so much either. And to be able to see spikes and troughs and general changes in demand and quickly identify, then you need to be the person on the front foot. You need to be able to spot these changes. You need to be able to be the proactive one, not just being reactive and then whinging that somebody didn't tell you that something was happening. And then the final point is internally or within your business. And basically, is there visibility for everybody concerned here? I think that quite often this element is associated with many different acronyms, S&OP processes or integrated business processes. But regardless of what the process is that is in place, visibility is absolutely essential. You can design the world's greatest process, but if you're in sales and I'm in operations, we both need to be able to have visibility of that which is relevant to us. So they're my 3 sort of abrupt descriptions of end-to-end visibility, but I am maybe genuinely interested. I think from our point of view, end-to-end visibility is described as I've just seen it, but I'm aware that other people see it from different perspectives or subtly different contexts. Perhaps, maybe from your side, how would you describe it?
Yeah, I think actually more or less in the same way, right? So on the one hand, like the examples, or at least the definition that you gave on upstream and downstream, and even in the business within, that's very relatable. We do that as well. I think you could also look at the definition for, what you determine as your starting point and your ending point, right? So within Flexport, we predominantly look at the life cycle of shipments, right? So and that entails a little bit more than the transportation from A to B, right? It starts already with understanding, like before it actually gets shipped, what happens when the purchase order is placed, for instance. So we try to prolong that end-to-end visibility a little bit on both sides. But I do think the way that you look at end-to-end visibility is even a little bit broader, right? Because you are actually involved already in the process before that purchase order is being placed. How do you actually come to that purchase order, based on raw materials, stockouts, etc. So end-to-end visibility, same concept, I would say. But let's say the length of the end-to-end might differ a little bit. And if you want to create that true visibility, I think it's important to connect all of these different subsets of that are contributing to your end-to-end visibility, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, totally. Okay.
Hey, so end-to-end visibility, I guess it's clear what we mean with that. Also, the purpose of this webinar is actually to understand also, how costly it is to not have that visibility end-to-end, right? So let's first take this one to the audience. On the screen right now, you see a poll, you see a question, and we're super interested in also understanding from you, what do you see is the biggest challenge, or the biggest issue if you don't have that visibility in your supply chain. So feel free to tick one of the boxes that you see on the screen. Changes in demand that are recognized too late. There's a delay in goods of delivery as a direct consequence of that lack of visibility. Internal information incomplete. For instance, a good example there is sales promote without informing operations, for instance, or no visibility in the additional cost that the lack of visibility might bring. So I would invite you all to submit your poll here. And we'll have a quick look at the results in a few seconds. So while you are thinking about which answer to tick, Richard, what would you do? What's your take on this one?
Okay, you put me on the spot a bit. I guess my answer would be it's associated with two of them. So it's sort of changes in demand brought about by lack of information. So quite often we see businesses have a promotion put on by a sales department, but the lead time of this product is 12 weeks, and the sales department determined that the promotion is going to be in 4 weeks' time. And they say, right, we're going to have an uplift of 100%. And of course, the two bits of information don't correspond to one another. Panic happens, and firefighting, air freighting, general chaos moves in.
Yeah. I can certainly relate to that.
I was going to say, is it something you can relate to?
No, yeah, definitely. But I think that also one of the things that we hear a lot from our customers, or our customers who are interested in working with us, is specifically also that last point, right? So that they say, like, hey, the lack of visibility causes actually a lot of things to happen, but in the end, it results in additional costs that I have no control over, right? And like that, as you know, that's not something that a lot of companies are pretty keen on, right? Servicing their customer is obviously priority number one, but at the same time, there needs to be some control over the cost. So the more that can be controlled, the better the comfort level. Let's have a look at what our audience is actually saying. So what that's interesting. So what we're seeing here is a neck to neck between changes in demand are recognized too late, and internal information is incomplete. And then followed by the delay in the goods of delivery, and then no visibility in the additional cost. That's I think they're very related to each other, right? So the changes in the demand that are recognized too late, that can be a direct consequence also of let's say the incompleteness of internal information.
Yep.
And I think this is we will talk a little bit about that one as well, but especially the changes in demand that are recognized too late. that could be directly related to actually not having the processes, the automation, or the linkage and data together to actually make sure that those demand changes are covered and recognized in the early stage. So that's an interesting one, and we will talk a little bit, especially about that first one, in the rest of this webinar. We started actually by mentioning how Flexport and Slimstock can work together for our customers and what we can do there. Maybe good to firstly have a quick look at our individual game plans, if you will, right? So what are we trying to solve for our customers? And then we can see if there's commonalities there. Richard, would you like to start with Slimstock?
Sure. I'll give you an overview if I can. I guess the easiest way of describing it is that at Slimstock, we aim to make our customers operationally excellent, particularly around anything associated with inventory. I think in today's world, I think if you achieve operational excellence, you're certainly well on the way to beating your competitor. And I think one of the main reasons for this is that we really believe that we see a lot of waste in supply chains, and this waste can be eradicated. And when I use the word waste, I'm not just trying to hang my coat on sort of the environmental context, but also sort of wasted cash that is tied up in inventory that is not moving due to poor stock turns, or wasted time that is spent through manual processes. And I think that goes on. Another big one for us is wasted opportunity. We see a lot of really good talent, really classy people who really can make a difference to their organizations, but their time is being absorbed by relatively manual tasks that can be otherwise performed better, or sifting through data in a manual way, trying to find the important bits. And wasted revenue through stockouts, and wasted margin through having to supply substitute products. And the list goes on. I think you can attach the word waste to many areas, but hopefully you get the picture. And really our goal is to work with companies to help them eradicate, or certainly significantly reduce this waste, and turn their inventory planning from a cost center into a profit center. I think that's a real game changer when you start making a difference. But also, if I put a line under that does at Slimstock, Mathijs. If I throw the ball back over your side, please tell everybody a little bit more about Flexport and what you're trying to aim to do for people.
Yeah, okay. I like the waste angle that you just mentioned, that you try to solve for your customers. Let me explain a little bit about Flexport indeed. Well, our aim at Flexport is to make global trade easy for everyone, right? That is our ultimate goal. That's what we're trying to do. And by saying that, actually, it implies that we believe that global trade is not easy at the moment, right? Which I think is fairly true. If we look at logistics and supply chain industry, I think we noticed about 4 distinct characteristics that make global trade a little bit more complex, if you will. Firstly, there's a lot of manual processes. You mentioned that as well, right? When shipping goods from A to B. It's not only more difficult to understand those manual processes because there's a lot of people involved, but it also leaves a lot of room for error. So that's the first one. The second one would be, also because of these manual processes, there's a lot of reactive management actually, right? That's more or less the standard in the market. And especially if you have different teams using different spreadsheets or other ways to manage the daily task, it's super difficult to actually prioritize and to signal those urgencies. So there's a lot of reactive management going on. Then the third part would be, and specifically in trade, we still have to deal with a lot of static document, right? So commercial invoices, packing lists, bill of ladings, and in many cases, those still live in scans or in PDF. So it's super difficult also to look at historical performance. And this makes the data actually almost useless, right? And from an analysis perspective. So we try to solve that as well. And the last characteristic there of our industry is the siloed communication, right? There's a lot of siloed communication going on between the different teams, which leaves a lot of room actually for false interpretation. And I always make the analogy with a game we used to play as kids, right? Which is called Chinese whispers, where you stand in a circle and you tell one specific phrase in the ear of the other, and then you find out what in the end that phrase becomes after going through that circle. And the outcome of that sentence was always rather hilarious, right? And this is exactly what's happening if you go on with that siloed communication, and that's what we're trying to solve. Also for our customers. How we're doing that is by creating a platform where we have the visibility, the communication, the operation, and the analysis all in one, right? So really super important when you want to focus on that end-to-end visibility. So that's a little bit how we try to help our customers with making global trade a little bit easier for them. What I know about your organization and have a look at what's on this screen, because I hope you agree with me, but also how you just described it, I see a lot of commonalities between both companies. And on the one hand, I'm seeing that both companies are actually using data to create that visibility, but not only to create that visibility, but also to make better informed decisions. Visibility is nice. Not if you can't make any decisions with that, and I think that both companies are truly focusing on that. Would you agree to that?
Yeah, totally. I think it's absolutely essential to have this high quality data and making best use of it, and also being able to draw the attention to the data which is important. I think there's lots of data in organizations, but being able to highlight that data which is relevant.
Yeah. It's a good point that you're making there, right? Which is the high quality data. This seems a little bit like a no-brainer, but it actually is not, right? So connecting different data sets and is not the biggest challenge, I would say. But if you need to manipulate that data because of the data quality or the data fit, before you can actually make a decision, it really defeats to a large extent, I would say, the purpose there, right? So decisions need to be made fast, and there's no time for manual overrides or interpretation. And we will talk a little bit about that in a second. But the last point, what we also point out here is with respect to the end-to-end visibility is what we're actually doing is we're creating a network around milestones rather than a sequence. That's actually what we're doing. So end-to-end doesn't mean, let's say, from point A to point B, but it's actually more like a network where you make sure that you bring all of those different milestones together. And I know that you think exactly the same about that one, but maybe I explained it a little bit cryptic. So what's your take on this one? How would you explain this?
Sure. Well, I guess without sounding like an advert for Microsoft here, I think it's about creating an ecosystem. And what we mean is that we really want to make sure that each element or each event or each thing that happens in our end-to-end cycle, it's not only connected to the next one, but it's all interconnected. And where it's relevant, we get that information sharing. And if we don't do this, you get small or subtle changes, they go unnoticed, and they might even have a big impact. These subtle changes might even have a huge impact further down the line. And you can prevent this ripple effect, or I think it's commonly known as sort of a bull, or we commonly refer to it as a bullwhip effect, by sort of happening. You can see this in recent times. And if I take a silly example, a few months ago the world went bananas around toilet paper, and in most instances it's produced locally, so it's not even a long lead time product, and still we couldn't get it to the shelves effectively because there was a little bit of irrational behavior taking place in the marketplace. I'm sure we all remember this. Seems a distant memory now, but it wasn't that long ago. And in reality, there wasn't any shortage of the stuff anywhere in the supply chain. There was no shortage of raw materials. There was no shortage of production lines. But demand had skyrocketed a little bit at the start of the pandemic. And it started what we refer to as the bullwhip effect. And so there very quickly became no stock on the shelves. And when we did find it, well, we then stupidly went and bought 10 months worth. So that means we didn't have to go and buy it again, which meant that upstream, the demand was completely suppressed, and then there became a surplus of it in various areas. And really, these subtle changes, or these not so subtle changes, just amplified at each stage, and the bullwhip effect just basically swung around from being understock to overstock. And it's not really a new phenomenon, particularly fierce in that particular environment situation. And perhaps I chose a rather bizarre situation as the analogy on the Chinese whispers thing. I think it's a really good way of describing it, and that a very clear message starts off at point 1, and even by the time it gets to point 3 or point 4, the message has been completely and utterly lost.
Yeah. Hey, who would have thought a year ago that we would explain the bullwhip effect by using toilet paper? Huh? But, it's a very good one. Okay. Hey, let's skip a little bit the theoretical part right now. I think we explained what we're trying to achieve here, and what the advantages there could actually be. As mentioned, we have a lot of. So let's dive a little bit more into customers, right? So we have a lot of customers in common. There's a lot of overlapping customers, which I think makes sense because like the far majority of both of our customers share the desire to have more control over the supply chain, right? By increasing visibility and the ease of operation, which is what both of our companies are focusing on. So it actually makes sense. There's a lot of overlap in those customers. But I'd like to discuss with you the specific case for Blokker. And Blokker, for those of you who don't know, is a Dutch retail brand. It's been out there forever, right? So every person in the Netherlands, I think, knows Blokker. It was founded a long time ago. They have a lot of stores, more than 350 stores. Predominantly in the Netherlands, and they're focusing on household goods, right, and electronics, ranging from electronics to kitchen appliances, etc. And what they've done is they have actually shifted from a push to a pull supply chain, right, which is a big thing, right? This is not something that you do overnight, and you do have to make sure that your systems are ready for that. If you look back to the pull that we just saw, one of the biggest issues there is changes in demand, that couldn't be managed properly, which was the number one outcome. That's exactly what you need to manage if you want to go from a push to pull supply chain. That's absolutely necessary. On the other hand, they switched their sourcing from predominantly domestic suppliers to new suppliers in the Far East Asia. And as quoting by one of the senior execs, also from the chain, while this shift was positively impacted the margins, it actually amplified the issues we were facing with our supply chain visibility. And I think that's where both of our companies came in. We were obviously both focusing on our individual strength in the beginning. Maybe, Richard, you can tell me a little bit what you were doing with Blokker? Sure.
Well, we've been working with Blokker now for over a decade at least, and as you've mentioned, we've seen them transform their business in a really, really positive way. So as a group of people to work with, it's always exciting and enthusiastic to be around them. And really the key thing that we've worked with them on, and I guess in keeping with the theme of what we're talking about today, is visibility throughout their entire network, bringing together their distribution center, their stores, and their e-commerce business. And it's previously their distribution center was planning their inventory without any real insight into the customer demand. And as such, the result was that they had safety stock upon safety stock upon safety stock in an attempt to make sure that their customers always experienced very good service level and on-shelf availability. However, but when we were able to bring everything together for them, and also by their they merged their distribution center with their e-commerce business, they've been able to eradicate approximately 40% of that safety stock that they were previously holding. Of course, it's a significant amount of cash that was just tied up in inventory. And of course, I'd love to sit here and say it was all attributable to us and it was all Slimstock's doing. But I think the truth of the matter is that it was the process or the alignment of this process that was the key driver. But we provided the visibility and the tools and the insight to be able to allow them to fulfill their process or their desired process. And the other thing that we've also enabled them to do is we've enabled, or this visibility has also allowed them to structure their supply chain or their planning department into really efficient areas. So it's not just about this ecosystem within your entire supply chain, but also being able to see that information, which is really rich, associated with what you want to see, but also being able to see visibility into the areas that you just touch upon. And it really has brought about some stability for them. It's brought about the ability to react instantly or be very reactive, but also it's brought about it's eradicated some real manual interventions, which has enabled the skill and the ability of their people to really shine and take them on to the next level as well. So from a Slimstock point of view, that's pretty much what we did. And I'm really interested to hear your take on this from your side.
Yeah, before I'm sharing that, how are you using Flexport here as Slimstock? What are you?
Sure. Okay. Well, really, to make accurate inventory forecasts and demand plans, etc., I think it's really critical to understand what is happening to the goods in transit. So, if we say that a product or a group of products takes roughly 12 weeks for the goods to arrive at the desired location being the store or the DC. And in those 12 weeks, a lot can happen. I mean, we were laughing earlier, but 12 weeks ago, we were all locked in our houses. So a lot can happen in this 12-week period. And really, the three things that can really impact is that the goods are sold either faster or slower than we've planned for. So the trick here is to get immediate notification of a change in demand and deal with it. But that's really what we deal with. But from the Flexport side, really, we really need the information that you provide, and that is, where is the goods not being produced in time? So we've ordered the goods, but we need to know the status of where that is and when it's not going to be produced in time. And then also, even if they are produced in time, we need to know when those goods that are in transit are delayed for some reason. And we need to be able to identify that quickly and be able to make plans to deal with that particular problem. So really, it's you asked the question about what we were using from Flexport, and it's really that production time and also the transit time or the delays in there. And really, to make the most accurate inventory forecasts, we need to make sure that we have the latest status of all these three events. Quite often, if you think about what we would do, we would we would order a product, it would go into the system, and we would anticipate that the lead time is 12 weeks, therefore it will be arriving in 12 weeks. But of course, as we all know, a lot can happen. And the information from Flexport is dynamically enriching that information all the time. So
Got it.
That's the sort of thing. So I presume as well you guys are also stealing information, using information to further enrich your side of things. How does that work from you?
Yeah, fair enough. I think, also when working with Blocker by creating the visibility actually in their shipment lifecycle, we were able to identify also definitely areas where we saw that the current process was going suboptimal, and we managed to actually realize some significant cost savings for them, especially also on containers sitting in ports too long because of lack of visibility. But coming back to your question, we're doing exactly the same thing as you're doing with our data. You're using our data because it's granular and it gives you a very good let's say insight into the latest status of where goods are. We are using your forecast actually, or the details of your forecast, to forecast ourselves. So we need to deal on behalf of our customers, obviously also with our carriers, right? We establish those relationships with those carriers, and forecasting is an important part there. And as you know, in logistics, a lot of hiccups will arise, right? So it's not the question if those disruptions are going to arise, but when, right? So, and we're using your forecast to actually, so your purchase forecast, we're using that to better forecast ourselves what we believe we are going to ship together with our carriers. And, this is needless to say, the better our forecast is, the more likely it is that our cargo is not going to be left on the quay. So we are spending an awful lot of time on actually making sure that forecast is very accurate. And you're helping us to make that forecast even better, together with, in this case, Blocker or any other customer, where we also receive a forecast from. It's a joint combination of the two. So you're truly enriching, let's say, with your data, how we ourselves make decisions for our customer. So from a forecasting perspective, that's really an important element.
Okay.
Well, I think, we explained a little bit what the advantages are, but maybe it's good to turn it around, right? What happens if you don't focus on that end-to-end visibility? The poll showed already a little bit of the challenges there, but let's see if we can make that a little bit more practical. So you mentioned your model is also based on different data sets that feed into the model, and where you help your customer in actually reducing those buffers, right? What happens if you don't integrate the models, right? What's the impact there for customers?
Okay, I guess the impact can be discussed in a few ways, but maybe if I give you one example, which I think is quite powerful. I think when you're planning inventory, there are some key elements that are needed to get a really effective plan. I think, firstly, you need to be able to create a high-quality forecast, which is based on good, solid historical demand, together with market intelligence and promotional information. So this gives you a high-quality forecast. But then once we have our demand plan, what we really need as well is accurate inventory master data. For example, at a basic level, lead times and minimal order quantities. We need accurate stock on hand, so we know what we've actually got. We need accurate sales orders, so we know what we expect to sell, or we know what we've committed to sell, should I say. But also, we need accurate inbound information, both in terms of the date and the quantities. And really, if I just take this last point, and you can see, just to talk you through sort of a worked example, and I've made the numbers fictional, but just to make it clean. If you've got an item and it has a sales price of 10 euros, and you've got a cost price of this item of 6 euros, so you have a margin of 4, and you've got a weekly average demand of 100 units, you can see that you're making 400 euros of margin per week on this particular one individual product. Now, again, if you've calculated that you wish to, or if the requirement to satisfy your service level is that you have a safety stock of 100 units, or 1 week of demand, always a safety stock, and you have a lead time of 8 weeks. So there's your situation. And now let's assume that, unfortunately, our delivery is 2 weeks late, and we don't get any visibility of this until the last minute. If it's 2 weeks late, in week number 1, we consume 100% of my safety stock. And then in week number 2, I lose 1 week's sales, which is, okay, people maybe think it's not that huge a number, it's 400 euros. But if you think, quite often, we're dealing with customers who have thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of SKUs. So therefore, losing margin on one particular SKU, A, is multiplied through all of those that you have out of stock on, but you're also giving your competitor a gap in the door to get in there. You're losing a little bit of loyalty from your customer. You're annoying them with the customer service. Maybe you're supplying an alternative product which is costing you margin. So it really is essential that you get this right. And of course, that accurate inbound information is essential to get some accurate planning.
Yeah, so it's not only the cost element that you're mentioning here, but it's also your image, reputation, and customer loyalty that is at stake.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, totally. It really does. Sorry, repeat, Mathijs?
Would you say that the companies who master this are would you consider them the winners in today's economy?
I certainly think that those that are mastering it, whilst not, if they're mastering it with efficiency and effectiveness, then yes, most certainly. I think, of course, there are always customers that will master the service level or master the availability by just stocking gallons and gallons of product. And but I think if you're mastering it with operational efficiency, then yes, you're well on the way to doing so. But I also think, Mathijs, and I think this is a really important point, is that it's not just, as I mentioned, it's not just mastering it, it's how you master it. So are you mastering it by overstocking, or also are you mastering it by air freighting product every 5 minutes so that the illusion is that you have a fantastic operation, but actually if you dig beneath the surface, there is a huge amount of air freight being consumed and firefighting. And maybe if from our point of view, we've got sort of a various amount of surveys and research done that sort of suggests that for every 1% of availability you improve as a business, you can basically add between 0.5 and 1.5% of revenue. So if you're a £100 million business, and you have an availability of 93% and you increase it to 94%, you've just gained yourself £1 million of revenue for no effort whatsoever. But also from your side, I'm intrigued. How much does expediting cost these days? What's the implications of that?
Yeah, it's a good question. A little bit on how you define expediting, your cargo. There's a couple of let's say options that you have there. One is obviously on the ocean vessel, try to see if you can find a faster service. You can do that, let's say, more on the inland part, right? Try to see if you can expedite it there. In the most extreme case, air freight, right? So get your goods in earlier by air freighting it. The difference, especially if you go, from a slower service to an express service, can easily go up to 25% easily, right? So it's quite a bit of cost or cost increase at stake there. So I think it's crucial to understand what you need to expedite, right? And one of the things that we're seeing, and this was also coming out of the survey, it's difficult to make that decision, right? It's difficult when something happens, when there is a potential stock out or whatever, goods will need to be expedited, but this is always happening in a very short time frame. So you have to make sure that you know exactly what you need to expedite. And if you don't have that information, and it's not, to your point, signaled very early in the process with the subtle changes, then you run the risk that you don't have enough time to make that decision what needs to be expedited and what not. And the risk of that is that you're going to say, if I don't know, I'm going to expedite a little bit more than I would normally do. So let's say, the impact there would be really to try to leverage or try to minimize the stuff that needs to be expedited. But it actually works the other way around as well. On the one hand, it is important to understand what needs to be expedited, but it's also important to know which goods actually can take a little bit longer, right? Because there you can have there's some big savings there as well, right? So if you say like, hey, for those goods, I don't mind to use a slower service, or actually I don't mind if the goods are going to be rolled the next time. If that's going to save me cost, as long as I can manage it, that's fine. So it works in both ways, I would say. So understanding exactly, those priorities is surely a big, I wouldn't say cost saver, but it helps you to not add additional cost, if that makes sense.
Sure, makes sense.
Cool. Maybe if we dig a little bit deeper into the case that we just mentioned, also from Blocker, where we're actually using each other's data, we could actually take that one step further, right? So not only using each other's data, but really integrating the data into each other, and looking at the data together with our customers. So at Flexport, we provide already, the details on a school level, right? That you just mentioned as well. So it helps already in understanding more about what you need to prioritize and what you don't need to prioritize, right? It still needs, however, a lot of manual coordination, right? So where do you need those goods for? Sometimes it's super clear. So some of our customers add actually a description, to their shipment saying product for Easter promo or something. So you know exactly, what the sense of urgency is. But sometimes it's less clear. So what we're implementing right now, that's also what we're doing. There's a customer calling you, Rich. There's what we're doing right now together with you is to look at those different categories, right? So can we actually use your information and add that to, let's say, the product description that we have right now? And that would look a little bit like this, right? So we're integrating the reasons for order, the reasons for purchase. That is the information that we're getting from you, and we're integrating that with the shipping details, right? So we're adding that to the shipment lifecycle. So we have new items, for instance, repeat orders and promotion items, and those are just three categories that we have identified with the customer. Those can obviously differ per customer, but if you add those, you can already add the sense of urgency a little bit, right, to the product that you're shipping, which makes it a lot easier to determine, hey, which ones need to be expedited and which ones don't need to be expedited. And there's a few additional dimensions that we might want to add there, because it's not only those categorizations, but within those categorizations, you could also have, if your stock out probability is increasing, then obviously that will impact whether you need to prioritize it or not. So this is the integration that we've currently worked on, and this is truly where we make data that we both have available for our customer as well, and using that data in the SIP. Especially on those additional dimensions, Rich, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I think you quite rightly said. I think the importance is being able to classify or being able to identify how you're treating these. And if I just take the one middle one that you mentioned, these repeat orders, obviously within the business, it's essential that you understand the importance of these repeat orders. And one of the things we always advocate is this sort of Paretoing, or people might call it sort of ABC matrix, whatever, of their business, so they can understand what their A items are. And I don't just mean their A items. Some people always get drawn towards the fastest movers or the biggest margin. But we're also talking about those items that are maybe really low value, but the customer is deemed to be very poor performing if they don't have them in stock, for example. So it really is about identifying those service levels. And I think one of the things that I like this is, and I think when we've both spoken to Blocker and Hans calls it, I think he's referred to it as this dynamic shipment priority, where he really is able to identify, well, exactly what it says on the tin, the dynamic shipment and the priority of which we want to focus on. And really, if you look at his end game, really, the best way I can describe it is that they're trying to balance at all times the age-old sort of conundrum of making sure that they've got extremely high service levels on their key items. And what you define as a key item, of course, is subjective to you as a business. But they're really high service levels on those key items. And of course, as we've mentioned before, increasing your customer loyalty and your revenue on those. But this needs to be balanced as well with the logistics spend for the rest and on those items. We don't just want to have these high service levels by at any cost. So it's a constant balance. I don't know if it works in language. I'm sorry, guys, but in a playground we have a seesaw. So it's like a balance with two kids on the seesaw trying to make sure they've got this worked out. But at the same time, it's to achieve this with minimal manual coordination. So it's all the time fighting these sort of three angles to make sure that we've got the best scenario here.
Yeah. I think it's spot on. It's a very good representation of this, indeed, the end game of what we try to achieve here. So I'm also very, very pleased of the steps and the successes that we had there, and I'm pretty sure that we can bolt on, specifically also if you look at those different dimensions, we can make it even better going forward. Nice.
Yeah, undoubtedly.
Maybe also conscious of time. This was I guess, Richard, you agree. This is the story that we wanted to share with you. And firstly, how we started, what we believe was where we saw the upside, especially for our customers, and how we could make this all scribble down some notes. So we started with means, right? To those subtle changes, right? That's very important to create that responsiveness. And then we talked how important it is to connect the inventory data and processes on the one hand with the ship life cycle on the other hand. And both processes are extremely dependent on each other. And the more data or the more details and the more accurate your data is, right, the better you can use that data, right? And I think we shared how we're both using each other's data and how our customers are in the end also using our data. And last but not least, we discussed what you can achieve if you not only use each other's data, but you start to fully integrating that, right? By building these dynamic shipment priority models that we just explained. Huh? So with the ultimate goal to make those decisions a little bit more automated and maximizing the probability that the right goods will arrive at the right location and at the right time, which is, I guess, the essence of and the basics of supply chain management.
Yeah, so, totally agree.
So thank you very much, Richard, for having this discussion with me. Very, very interesting. Maybe right now, let's see if there's some time for some Q&A. Remke, can you
we have a couple of questions. Can you hear me properly?
Okay. Yep, go for it.
Okay, good.
Make them nice and easy ones.
I'll try. So there's one question that goes that when Mathijs talks about the benefits of having the Slimstock forecast, it becomes abstract on how this is helping Flexport. Prior to the pickup order, how is the Slimstock forecast helpful? Richard, can you answer that?
I'll certainly try. I think it's helpful in a few dimensions. And again, in no particular order. First of all, I think one thing is the output. One thing that Slim4 is able to output all the time is not just a forecast, but is a subsequent purchase forecast. And obviously, this purchase forecast can be aggregated up into elements such as volumetrics. So we're able to produce a volumetric forecast going forward so that you guys are able to see what you will be required, or what the requirements will be from a freight point of view. So you know what I need to look for the next 52 weeks, or what my anticipated freight requirements are for the next 52 weeks. And as I understand it, the more accurate you are with that, or the less you are letting your freight partner down, the more likely you are to be looked after extremely well. So you're giving them a little bit of supplier information, I guess. So that's one thing. The other thing I think that we're doing is that quite often what we're seeing is that within the portfolio of products, you highlight to the likes of Blocker where their product is in the world and when it will land in the place that you want it to land. But what Slim4 adds to that is which item should I focus on? So you have 10,000 items, or maybe you have 1,000 items at any one time that are being transported, but you only have 50 items that you need to expedite. And the first thing that will happen is that, the big power of Slimstock is that it will identify which one of those items you need to go and hunt for, and then obviously the Flexport information is able to tell you where in the world it is and what you can do with it. So it's about taking both bits of information and getting nice and being able to deal with them accordingly. I hope that answers the question. I don't know whether Mathijs wants to add anything to that.
No, I think that my webcam failed on me right now. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Hear you.
Okay, perfect. So unfortunately, I missed the last part of what you were mentioning, Richard.
It was a brilliant answer I gave.
so I can only agree with your answer.
Okay.
All right, Richard, we have another question for you. Do you have any advice for forecasting products which consist of many composite items from different suppliers?
Okay, if I interpret the answer correctly, what this is an item which is almost like a bill of materials item where you're, making in a simple form. Maybe the item is a table and you have the legs from one supplier, the top of the table from another supplier, and maybe the screws and the fixtures from another supplier. So I apologize if I've interpreted it correctly, but that's how I'm going to interpret it. What we would do is, first of all, I would like to see a forecast on the finished good. The finished good being the table, and I would like to see what my anticipated demand is on the finished good. I would then like to see the inventory parameters associated with the component parts, so the legs, the screws, etc. And then therefore I can, with the information on that, once I have the demand for the finished goods, with our solution or with any planning solution, it's relatively straightforward to blow the bill of materials and order those parts accordingly. The complexity of this comes if your delivery time to your customer is significantly shorter than this only works when your order to your customer has a shorter lead time than your lead time back to your supplier. So you need to almost have the table components ready to stock.
Okay, thank you. Mathijs, I have a question for you. What part of the solution is covered by Flexport and what part by Slimstock? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, no, sure. So, I mean, in the end, we're both focusing on our own area of expertise, right? So, which is where Slimstock or Slim4, as Richard was referring to, is predominantly focusing on the forecast itself, the purchase forecast here. We're actually using that information to look at shipment priorities, actually. So we're feeding that into our system, and our system starts actually, with the purchase order, and then making the shipment lifecycle fully visible. So we take over, if you will, the operation as soon as the information is fed from the Slimstock forecast into our system via the customer in some cases, or that can be direct as well. So that's actually what we're trying to do. So we're right now integrating also, let's say, the data that we need, to feed into both systems. The first step was obviously, hey, can we use your forecast? Can we see your forecast, because we would like to have it, to prioritize and to take action on the shipments, and the other way around. And that can be, a data dump, or every time you send the data. Not ideal, obviously, especially because it's dynamic. So now we have that integrated as well. So that was the next step. But there's a clear distinction between what Slimstock is doing here from an inventory management and forecasting perspective, and what we are doing from a shipment lifecycle perspective.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then one final question for this webinar. Are there any IT integrations available between ERP systems such as Microsoft and SAP, or any other with Slimstock and Flexport? Can you both maybe elaborate on that?
Yeah. So I think, like I briefly alluded to that already. This is indeed possible, right? So the integrations, both companies are obviously, what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that we integrate as much as possible the data that we have with the different systems and modules out there. So IT integration here is 100% possible. Important there is that you very clearly define upfront how the process looks like. You test it. You test it without having those integrations first, and then you start integrating. And it doesn't really matter, what kind of ERP system you have there. It depends a little bit on, let's say, also the willingness and the ability of the customer. I think, Richard, I don't know what's as soon.
We're from our point of view, we're ERP agnostic. We have well over 1,000 companies and probably well over 200 ERPs. In terms of the likes, I think the question mentioned Microsoft, for example. We have standard connectors with various of the Dynamics ERPs. But of course, we also need to have a look at the information, and standard only gets us so far. There's always a little bit of bespoke elements to each project, but of course that's not great. It's not a great amount either.
Okay. Well, as we've come to a close, final thoughts on if you have anything that you can start doing tomorrow. What, in your opinion, Richard, should all the listeners be doing tomorrow?
I guess I have probably two quick answers. Firstly, I don't know, I'm a big fan of Gordon Ramsay and his kitchen nightmares, and I like it when he goes into a restaurant and he tells everybody to eliminate their menu to a much more reduced menu. And I often think the same as many businesses, is that there's just too many products. So a bit of a product rationalization, and perhaps it can be achieved by Paretoing your assortment. Going in, having a look at your assortment, which items make you the margin, and which items are the volume sellers. And perhaps also you're able to identify, therefore, the reverse of that, the miserable items and the ones that are actually losing you money. And that leads into what you deal with it and how you ship them. I'm sure that information goes lovely into what Mathijs' systems.
Yeah, and maybe I'd like to add what I would do. Like first thing tomorrow, then after listening to this, I would actually look at my current processes of prioritizing my goods. So, what is exactly the process? Am I able to make those swift decisions when inventory levels are changing? That's the first step to fully understand that process. And if you're not able to, if you are able to prioritize those goods in a timely manner, do you also do you look at the different trade options there, right? So as we just discussed, so those would be the first two ones that I would focus on. Last but not least, I would really check which teams, the teams that are working on inventory management, or like on the logistics and the shipping part, to what extent are they exchanging information? Because we've actually found that a lot of customers, but both of our organizations were working on, and they weren't fully aware of each other and the capabilities there. So that would be also one. They check how much do the different teams know of each other's existence and the capabilities there.
Perfect. Okay.
Conscious of time, I think we need to close this here. I just wanted to again thank all the audience for joining, Richard for doing this with me, and Rimke to facilitate it. There is an on-demand version of the webinar which will be available shortly after the webinar, and that can be accessed using the same audience link that was sent to you earlier. And also want to make use of this opportunity to make sure that you save your spot for our next webinar, which is a little bit later on the state of trade for the Asia economic rebound. More to follow on that one on our website or on social. Thank you very much for joining us, and wish you a very great day.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mathijs. Have a great day.
Thank you.